Well, the English language major is a major that does a very in-depth and close look at the English language. It's different from the English major, which has more of an emphasis on literature and writing. We do some writing. We do a lot of looking at the English language. In fact, you might even call it an English linguistics major. English language graduates are well prepared to work in a variety of disciplines that involve a close interface with the English language. This could be such things as going into law school. It could be going into editing, going into education-related fields, advertising, public relations, software development, where that involves software that interfaces with the language, family history research. There are really a number of disciplines and graduate programs that this would prepare you well for. I think the skill set that students get from this major relate to some critical thinking skills that they develop, and also very good strengths in analyzing language concerns and language matters. Now, I think it's popular for people a lot of times to say they develop critical thinking skills, but I really do believe that this major does develop skills with regard to the language that will be very useful to people. Just as a quick example, we study the grammar of the language, and we're not studying it just to know the do's and the don'ts. That is something our students become more aware of as well. But we look at the language closely. For example, you've probably seen TV programs where the lawyers will say, "Objection, Your Honor, he's leading the witness." Well, there are grammatical structures that actually lead to that are identifiable, that are recognizable. WH words in questions like who, what, where, when, why. When you have those questions, you automatically have a presupposition. A presupposition is something that hasn't yet been established, or it's assumed. It may have previously been established, but not in that sentence. So if I say to somebody, when are you going to France? It presupposes they're going to France. If I say, why did you come to my house? It presupposes they came to my house. These are WH words. We study the grammatical structure. Possessives involve presuppositions as well. Our students get a good grounding in a very close analytical view of the language, and they're prepared to discuss it with articulation about why those things are the way they are in the language. This major overlaps with other majors. There are majors such as psychology that will look at language in the brain and look at matters related to the ways people process language. But we have a course in psycholinguistics, as it's called. We have courses that deal with literature-related concerns, where we don't make our major based around analyzing literature, but our close look at language, including historical varieties of the language. We look at Old English and Middle English and Early Modern English. Those help us approach older texts and other literary, even modern literary texts with some analytical skills that are very useful. So we overlap a little bit with the English major. We overlap with philosophy a little bit, because philosophers sometimes study the philosophy of language, and some of those things overlap with our concerns. Let me say, as a point of interest, in our major, one of our courses is Early Modern English, which is the language of the Scriptures. So by studying Early Modern English, it opens up some greater understandings of Shakespeare and the King James translation of the Bible, as well as the Book of Mormon translation. So we, in some ways, we're like the traditional philology area of study, which relates to a love of words, a love of language, and you can get a lot of that kind of perspective and background through our English language major. This major has a lot of breadth to it. There are a lot of interesting areas to go into, to study personally. Our faculty have some interesting backgrounds and areas of study. Some of my study has been related to humor, for example, and when you're looking at a close look at the English language, it takes you into areas of literature and humor and the scientific study of language and aspects related to law and therapy and I'm speaking of speech therapy and other things. We overlap with a lot of areas, but there's a great deal of breadth, and I think it's fascinating. Most people know something about language, they speak it, and they're interested to find out things about that language that maybe they'd never really considered, answers to questions they've maybe had. This major is really full of a lot of gee whiz moments where you find vistas opening up to your view. It's a fascinating major.